Would everyone please rise and please join us. We'll be led in prayer by Alderman Brown.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessings upon the members of this council as we assemble here in the chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we'll strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration will install respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representatives, and that peace and harmony will mark all our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the city, by citizens of our community. Amen.
Amen.
Alderwoman Philbrick, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd ask for a motion for the adoption of the minutes of December 4th, 5th, and 18th, please. Alderwoman Stacey Gould, is there a second? Yes, Alderwoman Philbrick. Is there discussion? Questions, omissions, deletions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. It's adopted. For the record, Alderwoman Stephanie Burnham is not with us today due to a family emergency. I'd like that reflected in the record.
State of the City Address by Mayor Peter Albert Nystrom.
Good evening. I'd like to thank all of you for coming to tonight's council meeting. Tonight, we hope to continue a process that I believe actually started 2 years ago. We are in better position to handle the loss of state revenue and the difficult choices still ahead. Our efforts to control and reduce spending and acknowledge the burden that taxes create for our citizens provides for us a blueprint for a near future. Over the last 2 years, our city treasurer has managed the city's accounts and investments, generating new income through these efforts, securing savings, and lowering the cost of managing these funds. Through the efforts of our city manager, we are continuing to realize savings through stronger negotiations with our employees. It is important that we find additional future savings as we complete the pension agreement pending before this council with the majority of our unions. The city manager, the human resources, and finance departments, as a matter of policy, are reviewing employee benefit packages and are proposing adjustments to make them more financially sustainable each time a union contract is up for negotiations in the future. Additional efforts by our finance department and our municipal bond council all will additionally found savings of just under $250,000 back in March of 2017. This concerned the refinancing of 2009 general obligation bonds. During this process, Standard & Poor's affirmed a Norwich AA bond rating. The past council made it a priority to put properties back on tax rolls. These efforts are continuing. Further review of all city department budgets and city consolidation must be on the table. Recently, we moved the Human Services Department to City Hall and have successfully marketed 80 Broadway, which will help our grand list. Recently, in the Norwich Bulletin, the Norwich Community Development Corporation reported significant investment occurring in our downtown. Their analysis showed that up to $10 million has been invested in downtown through the efforts of the local bank, restaurant expansions, private investments targeting new residential opportunities. At the heart of this effort is the opening of new offices of NCDC in their successful incubator business known as Foundry 66. It should be noted that in a very short time, the available space for additional new small businesses will grow as the second floor is slated to open. At this time, I want to also acknowledge the seamless transition of our Norwich Police Department as former Chief Louis Pizarro retired and Patrick Daly assumed the role of Chief, followed by the promotions of other officers to Deputy Chief, Captains, and Lieutenants. On a special note, the City of Norwich made the top 101 safest cities in the United States and ranked number 3 in Connecticut, according to safehome.org. This is a direct result of the efforts of our police department, our community policing models, and their outstanding service. This finding is a result of a combination of FBI reports and other law enforcement demographics, including population density, unemployment rates, and income levels. To learn more, you may check this out further on safehome.org, safercities/Connecticut. Tonight we begin this journey together as a new council, and I'm confident that our members will work together. While services are needed and must be provided to our citizens, we cannot lose sight that they, our taxpayers, are the ones paying the bill. During the recent campaign, I talked about the promise of a new Norwich that prepares itself to be ready to accept challenges. Tonight, I'd like to outline some of those. First, I'd like to speak about preparing the city of Norwich for further private sector investment and how that investment will promote the view of Norwich as a regional asset. Perhaps some small towns could contract for services for a fee from departments such as Public Works, Police, and Fire. It's worthy to note that our paid and volunteer fire departments through municipal aid currently work as a regional asset. Norwich's role as municipal utility provider for the development of the future Preston Riverwalk will undoubtedly provide additional revenue, helping to grow the 10% payment to the city by the Norwich Public Utilities. But we must also acknowledge that this is years away. It is just one example of the city identifying new sources of revenue as we continue to deal with the politics of Hartford and the continued loss of state revenue. For example, I would urge this City Council to support a resolution asking the state to authorize cities like Norwich to have the right to collect a daily occupancy fee from the city's hotels. Additional new revenue may be found as the prior City Council gave notice and voted to notify that the city would be looking for 12% from NPU this year. This will have to be negotiated with the Board of Commissioners. It is not a done deal. In addition to our municipal role here, it is imperative that we focus on economic opportunities to ensure that our downtown and our city grow. As an example, the investment of the new development on the 320-unit Panema project shows the city has supportive infrastructure work to do, as well as guiding further private development there. In total, between Phase 1, 2, and 3, this project will be at least $80 million by the time it is complete. In 2010, the voters of the city passed a municipal bond providing for a private sector partnership for investment in downtown, which is one of the main reasons why we are seeing private investment now. Looking ahead, those three programs, which included grant, rental rebate, and loan components, need to be renewed and, I believe, expanded. As this new plan unfolds, we will have to follow our plan of conservation and development. Therefore, I am proposing additional areas of our city be included in the Downtown Bond program. For example, the area of Greenville, focusing on North Main and Central Avenue sections, as well as the west side of Norwich, including Lower West Thames Street, High Street Mechanic, West Main Street, and Upper Shipping Street. The goal of this is to build on what we have learned about a focused effort to encourage private development with well-designed programs identified in the POCD. This will first require a complete examination and explanation of the pros and cons of the program over the last 7 years and how those benefits can be expanded. The final authority of this proposal, however, rests with the voters, as this concept must go to referendum in November 2018 for their approval. My recommendation is 2018 because that will be a significant election cycle. With a race for governor, United States Senate, we will probably get a very large voter turnout, and that is a better reflection for a decision like this. Another opportunity for self-investment is focusing on our waterfront. Previously, in my last term as mayor, I began discussions with highway transportation people at the federal level to change the highway designations through downtown, redesigning Route 2 as Scenic Route 2. Route 2, as it now known, would change and would flow over 395 South and Route 2A East, reconnecting in Preston. This change would allow us to expand and enhance access to the waterfront and its uses. It would also remove thousands of vehicles, large and small, whose sole purpose is just to pass through our city, resulting in less damage to our roads and bridges and improving the air quality as well. All of these discussions are focusing on making Norwich a destination instead of a pass-through city. Focusing on reducing and slowing traffic down is a key component in improving the quality of life downtown and surrounding areas. Just as an aside, the state's redesign of Route 82 is still pending. Our strong opposition to a Rotary expansion experiment is still on the table, and it's still our responsibility. Working with the state of Connecticut DOT, the new design must incorporate features that enhance development and investment in our city, not harm it. You should also be aware that as the upgrades to the rail lines continue from New London to Palmer, Mass., our city should emphasize new business opportunities for companies located along the rail lines in the city of Norwich. Open discussions with them and how we can improve their own business models could enhance growth for them and additional jobs for our city. Even with the EPA floodway designation of Shipping Street, the active rail lines could still provide business opportunities above the floodway demarcation. The City Council and the Board of Education, I believe, should discuss the potential savings realized by the consolidation of the number of elementary schools that we operate. We can use the information gained from the past consolidation effort. I'm proposing that the Council and the Board of Ed create a building consolidation committee. A greater emphasis must include a committee comprised of teachers from every elementary school as we look to redesign our school system. During the fall, much discussion often focused on the city's role in providing access to recreation programs and healthy choices for children after school. Therefore, I'd ask people from the private and public sector for their ideas in forming a scholarship program. A scholarship program would provide assistance to those children who otherwise would not have access to Norwich-based programs such as PAL, Norwich Little League, Norwich Rec programs, etc. As part of gaining access, some component of community service might be considered as entry into the program as well. Existing examples currently operate in our local schools and could be adapted as models. Tonight, I would ask our Recreation Director and our Recreation Advisory Board to oversee this concept and report back to the Council. My statement tonight is intended to acknowledge a number of assets we have in our city. Those include 2 active rail lines, the beautiful waterfront, the industrial park including Dodge Stadium, current private investment occurring in downtown, the role that NPU continues to play, not just in the city of Norwich, but in the future site in Preston. Perhaps our greatest asset for current and new residents and businesses is our commitment to holding the line on spending and reducing taxes by our actions and not just our words. Further enhancement of public-private partnerships can be a cornerstone for new opportunities for our citizens. Together, it can lead us to enhanced revenue, a larger tax base, and a better quality of life for all our citizens. Thank you, and good night.
Proclamation, Norwich Youth Football League.
Good evening, everybody. I wanted to make sure we had a lot of people here for the mayor's state of address, so we held you guys on. Just kidding. But it was important that in the mayor's address that he talked about recreation, and that's a very important thing. And we're very excited to have the individual that we have as our new rec director, and I'm excited to work with her. I worked with her, actually, I coach sports, as a lot of people know here, and I actually started at the youth level. I coached a team called the Giants back in those days when you guys had the different teams like the Colts and the Packers and stuff, and it was very exciting for me back then. I was only 22 years old and was able to be a head coach of a youth football program, and it was exciting for me. But as I moved up through the ranks at Norwich Free Academy, where I coached Josh over there as a freshman, and he was that big then too, so but I was able to coach him there, and I had a lot of fun there. But I moved on to coaching actually a professional women's football team for 4 years, and your new rec director was one of my linemen on that team. So she certainly knows football and has a love for that sport. So you guys are very fortunate to have her selected for us. And I would be more involved, but I do coach a semi-pro team out of Danielson, so it takes a lot of my time. So I don't get to see you guys as much as I really would like to. So I'd like to call your cheer coach and your coach up. And tonight what we have is these proclamations. And in the future, what I'm going to try to do, since today is January 2nd, is the next time we do a proclamation for you guys, is we'll make it for the next day so that you can actually enjoy the whole day for what it is. So I'm going to read it to you tonight, and then I'm going to pass it off to your coaches, and because are the heart of you guys and the reason why you're here. And I was really excited to hear how you guys did in Virginia. I talked with Josh pretty long about that, so congratulations. Okay, city proclamation from the mayor's office. Whereas the Norwich Youth Football League, part of the Southern New England Football League Conference, is comprised of approximately 250 athletes in football and cheer. And whereas, under the guidance and the leadership of Johnny Burns in 2014, Alonzo Combs in 2016, Josh Hoffworth in 2017, and the Norwich Youth Football League has grown into a strong team and a force to be reckoned with. And whereas the Norwich Youth Football League has shown what great players they are, and as they have won 11 championships, 4 Super Bowls, have finished 2 perfect seasons, and were invited to participate in a national tournament in Virginia. The Rose City is very proud of their team. And whereas the Norwich Youth Football League has won numerous championships in cheerleading competitions with Coach Rod Nazoom's hard work and dedication in 2014, they clinched the junior large division, micro large division in 2015, the senior large division and junior large division, the micro small division in 2016. God, I love divisions. And the senior large division and junior large division. And whereas we commend the Norwich Youth Football League and cheering all the players, managers, coaches for their dedication, commitment to the sport, and to those principles of good sportsmanship, team play, which such activities endorses, and for the honor that they have brought to themselves and our community. Therefore, Mayor Peter Albert Nystrom, Norwich City Council President Pro Tem William Nash, on behalf of the Norwich City Council and the citizens of the City of Norwich, do hereby proclaim January 2nd, 2018 as Norwich Youth Football League Day in the City of Norwich. Signed, this day.
I don't know.
So not bad.
Let's go.
Thank you.
Second reading and action on item previously presented. Number 1, an ordinance to be listed as section 2.23 of the Norwich Code of Ordinance concerning municipal electric utility cooperatives and establishing the position of a municipal representative to be appointed by the council of the City of Norwich.
I'd ask for a motion to bring the ordinance properly before us. Alderwoman Stacy Gould, second, President Pro Tem Bill Nash. Yeah. Said that the motion include a waiving of the full text. You're in agreement with that?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderman Browning.
There are some elements of this ordinance which we believe can be improved. I've had discussions with members of the Republican Party and with my own party. We will try to amend it in the immediate future. There are some things like we want to put a reporting requirement in it so that the ratepayer representative has the duty to report back to the City Council. There are some other issues in here, like the purpose, I think, could be clarified, and that paragraph could be substituted. But we can do that next meeting and pass this at the present time.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, it'll be a roll call. Alderman Browning?
Yes?
Alderman DeLucia? Yes. Alderwoman Filbert?
Yes.
Alderwoman Stacy Gould?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Nash?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom? Yes. Motion carries 6-0.
Petitions and communication. Number 1, order presentation from Blum Shapiro, PC.
Good evening, members. Josh is just going to hand out some PowerPoint slides. There's a few in here. I'll move through them very quickly. I know you've got quite a few things to get to this evening. And as he's passing them out, I can start because it's not that relevant for you to be looking at it at this point in time. But what I'll go over is the engagement scope and report. By the way, I'm Ron Nosek. I'm the engagement partner from Blum Shapiro for the annual audit here in the city of Norwich. I will go over the engagement scope and reporting, some brief financial highlights that are at a pretty high level of snapshot, and then just very summarized deliverance of what our required communications to you are, which you have in fact already received in a separate communication when the audit reports were issued back a few weeks ago. If you have any questions as to what I'm discussing or something that perhaps you saw in the audited financial statements previously, please stop me at your convenience, and I'd be more than happy to address it as best as I possibly can here this evening. So the engagement itself, from the perspective of scope and reporting, we actually perform an audit engagement, and this is true to all governmental audit engagements in the state of Connecticut and quite frankly nationally, is they're performed under generally accepted auditing standards. They're performed under generally accepted governmental auditing standards, which is commonly referred to as Yellow Book. And then they are also performed under uniform guidance, which was formerly the federal single audit and the state single audit here in the state of Connecticut. That section, uniform guidance and state single audit, obviously pertains solely to the major state and federal grants that you get. Most of them here are either community development or education based, but there is quite a few federal money as well as state money that flows through the city. So under generally accepted auditing standards, that's the big opinion. That's page 1 of the audited financial statements that you get. That's the opinion we are required to issue relative to the financial statements, indicating whether or not they fairly represent the financial position, which is the balance sheet or statement of net assets, and results of operations, which are your operating statements or revenue expenditure statements for the year ended June 30, 2017. So we have issued a clean or unmodified audit opinion on those financial statements, which basically says, as stated, that they do fairly reflect the financial position and results of operations for the year. Under governmental auditing standards, or Yellow Book, we are required to report on internal control over the financial reporting function of the city, as well as compliance matters that could be material to the financial statements if a non-compliance event occurred. Under that reporting, we're required to communicate to you any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we found in the internal control system, and obviously to report to you any compliance violations that we found. Under those two criteria, there were no internal control matters that rose to the level of significant deficiency or material weaknesses. There were things, and there always are things, that may come upon the attention of the audit team as we're performing our engagement, that we'll communicate to finance and discuss it with them. We will at least get ourselves to a level of feeling as to whether or not they are isolated incidents or systematic. If they're systematic, then we're going to be talking to you about a significant deficiency or material weakness. There were none that rose to that level. And under compliance, we had no compliance findings relative to matters associated with financial reporting that could be material to the financial statements. Under uniform guidance, we're effectively doing the same thing, internal control, as well as issuing an opinion on compliance, but it is relative to the major federal programs and or major state programs solely. So it's not in the umbrella of the total reporting function or financial function of the city. Again, under that criteria, There were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that were found relevant to the major programs that we tested, either at the federal or state level. There were no compliance findings or violations that we found relative to those major programs, both at federal and state level as well. So clean reporting, if you will, throughout all of the scope criteria that we are required to report under here in the state of Connecticut. If you're following along in this handout, if you flip to page 6 and 7 of that, this is just a snapshot of the statement of net assets for both your governmental activities and business type activities as of June 30, 2017. I'm not going to go through this in any level of detail other than to focus you on page 7 in the bottom section of that portion of the statement relevant to net position. So if any of you are more familiar with commercial accounting or commercial financial statements, this would be the retained earnings section of your balance sheet. And you'll see under governmental activities at the end of the year, net position was $55,383. This is all rounded in thousands that you're looking at. And under your business type activities, which predominantly is the public utility, is a little over $114 million. But what I just always want to bring your attention to is the value of that net investment in capital assets, which is the first line item that's listed under that net position. You see $78 million under governmental activities, $133 million under business type activities. Those are, while net assets, if you will, they are not anything that you can liquidate and pay ongoing expenses with. So, when you look at this, and again, this is government-wide, so it's a roll-up of all of your governmental activities or a roll-up of all your business-type activities. Your unrestricted portion of net assets, which you can see for both governmental and business type, are in deficit positions, which is not unusual. Predominantly because of the position that in most communities are suffering from, the position of their pensions and OPEB liabilities that basically drag the net assets down. If you flip to the next 2 pages, those are the operating statements. Again, this is at the government-wide level. And the only thing I'm just kind of pointing you at here again is on the second page of that. The very last line listed there is your change in net position, increase or decrease. So under your governmental activities, you saw a decrease in net position of $4.2 million. Under your business type activities, you saw an increase in net position of almost $5 million. Flipping to the next page, just again, 40,000 feet here. Under the governmental activities, the net assets decreased by $4.2 million, and the primary reason of that, or the principal reason, was due to the pension expense and OPEB expense increases that were incurred in the city. Under business type activities, again, as I stated, is about a $5 million increase. That was predominantly due to a $3.2 million contributed capital associated with some construction that went on, and those assets are turned over to the control of the utility, and therefore almost a dead drop into net assets and increased position. The deferred, just in case you were curious as to what's hanging on the balance sheet under these categories, deferred inflows and outflows, if you look at them, almost all of them, other than one relative to a debt issuance and a deferred charge on a debt issuance, all of them are pension related. And what they basically are is when the actuaries calculate your pension expense and pension liability, if they were anticipating a rate of return of 7.5% and they got 2% or they got 15%, that's going to ebb and flow through your deferred outflows. They try to smooth it over an extended period of time. So eventually those will clear through the operating statement. They'll affect pension expense as it's booked in ongoing years. Next page, real quick, just touch on governmental activities. So this is your fund basis, if you will. The only thing I carved out of the financial statements to show you here are the fund balances for all of your governmental activity funds. As you see going across that page, you got general fund, your bond expenditure fund, educational grants fund, and your non-major governmental funds, which are comprised of quite a few funds. Now, everything but general fund, for the most part, if not 100%, so is restricted or committed for specific purposes. So talking about those fund balance positions really isn't of significant value to you, at least I wouldn't think, although I'm more than happy to address them further. General fund obviously is what we're really talking about. That's where you set your tax rate. That's what you guys are actively managing, I would assume, on an ongoing basis. So your fund balance position in the general fund at June 30, 2017 is $17,661,000. That represents about 14.4% of expenditures and transfers out in the general fund. Most of the common guidance currently today relative to how much fund balance you should be holding in order to be in a position to actively and successfully operate the government is right now the minimum actually has kind of sneaked up to almost 10%, and they're suggesting to hold as high as 20%. So you guys are really right in the middle there. Up until probably 2 years ago, the guidance was about 7.5 to 15, which you were right on the threshold of. But as we have seen here in the state of Connecticut, both statewide at the state level and here at the local level, pension and pension liabilities have created some significant havoc, and the rating agencies are starting to, for lack of a better term, get a little spooked about those liability numbers that exist, and so that number of fund balance is starting to inch up a little bit. Again, quickly, the next page there, what I did want to touch on, I didn't take a snapshot of this, but in the State of the City address earlier, some commentary was made, and I just actually thought this would validate the commentary. So from a budgetary basis, the city saw a surplus of about $2 million. So you did better by $2 million than you had planned. Revenues exceeded budgeted appropriation or appropriated revenues by about $1.6 million. Your expenditures were under what you had appropriated by about $746,000. As I look at it, I've been doing this for 30 years, it certainly would validate the comments that were made earlier that you guys are aggressively and effectively monitoring what's going on here from a spending perspective. Under your debt, just quickly, you can take a look at that. You can see the debt didn't change a whole heck of a lot. Overall debt from year to year, you opened the year with a little over $143 million, and you ended at $141 million. Your bonded debt was about $50.2 million of that, and you ended up at $52 million. You did have about $11.2 million issuance, which is comprised of some refunding as well as some new money. But most of the ebb and flow all kind of worked out where your debt position didn't change a whole lot year over year. What I would just have you take a look at is on the ending balance column. If you go down towards the bottom of that second section, you'll see the net pension liability and the net OPEB liability. That net pension liability, and this is for governmental purposes, so this is what's allocated to your governmental activities. There's a portion of this pension liability that is also allocated to the business type activities. That's $75 million as of June 30, 2017. Your OPEB liability, which actually is referred to as net OPEB obligation, is about $4.7 million. That changes a lot next year. That liability, as recalculated under the new guidance that will be required to be reported next year under GASB 68, is opening so we're opening July 1 of this year with a $44 million liability in OPEB. So the net position, if you will, on that government-wide statement that we first talked about is again going to change in a down trajectory because this liability has to come on to the financial statements as of next year under governmental accounting standards. Next page is just, again, won't spend much time on it, but that is the debt activity under your business type programs and your business activities. Again, did not change much at all. You opened up with $73.8 million in total debt, and you closed with $72 million. And as you see, again, in and around the same area, that second section, $36.5 million of that pension liability is allocated to your business-type activities. Last two things I'll go over is just, you can take a look at, are your pension plans and the funded position of those pension plans. So your city plan is funded at about 60%, 60.46%. That is as of June 30, 2017. And the volunteer firefighters plan is a bit less than that, 41.8. But as you look at it from the perspective of overall liability, that's an actuarial liability of about $3.5 million. That's not going to cause anybody to go running down the street, I would think. But you know, 108 million is that pension liability. And again, as we all know, state of Connecticut and all of our local communities are trying to work this number and manage this number as best you can. And then last page there, relative to financial data, this is the OPEB plan, again, as it stands now, under what is the old measure that's going away. It's a net OPEB liability. And basically how that liability was derived was if the actuary told you to contribute $10 and you contributed $8, you had a $2 liability, and that was the year that statement was implemented, and then it would ebb and flow from that point on. That all goes away, and it becomes now a true actuarial liability that, as I said, is going to open up at about almost $45 million. I will not go through the required communications. I think I've taken enough of your time. But again, those are the categories that we're required to communicate to you, those charged with governance relative to our audit engagement and any findings that we may have had. Those communications, again, did come to you when the audited financial statements were issued. So if you don't know or haven't seen what I'm referring to, Josh, I think, could provide you a copy of that letter. Finally, I leave you my contact information as well as the engagement manager. We'd be more than happy to field any questions that you may have along the way. You can just reach out to us directly at our office, and we'd be more than happy to address anything as best we could. So that's all I have for you. Hopefully I wasn't too boring, and if you have any questions, again, I'm more than happy to take them, and if not, I'll leave you to the rest of your business. Yep.
Members? Yes, Alderwoman Filbert.
Can you explain to us the OPEB, the other post-employment benefits? Is that mandated by the municipality, by the state, by the federal government? Where did that come from?
That basically is a portion of a benefit that likely it's embedded in your union contracts that was negotiated with the city at some point in time.
And then if I may have a follow-up?
Please.
You talked about our debt. Oftentimes we hear in the city that we don't borrow enough money. And I always say, just because you can borrow money doesn't mean that you should be. If I have a $25,000 limit on my credit card, I can spend that $25,000, but I have to pay it back. And usually at a substantial interest rate. So I just want people to understand that we're trying to be fiscally responsible. Just because you can borrow, just because our debt ratio is relatively low, it's not a bad thing. It's not necessary. Perhaps we could borrow a little more, but the bottom line is we still have to repay it. Thank you.
Any other members? Yes, Alderwoman DeLucia.
I want to clarify something, or hopefully you can clarify it for me. Our OPEB obligation is going to increase?
Yes.
Is that an actual increase, or is this a new guideline saying that we should have X amount of money set aside for this where we are not there yet?
No, it is under a new accounting standard that is required to be implemented. The liability, it went from the calculation I was talking to you about earlier, where if the actuary told you to contribute 10 and you contributed 8, you created a $2 liability. That is not and never was an actuarial liability. There always was a disclosure in what's referred to as your required supplementary information, your RSI, that gave the actuarial liabilities of your OPEB plan from the time that it's been required to be disclosed, which Josh, you could probably help me, but that's been 10 years plus, right? That disclosure's been in the financials. So it's always been there. It just hasn't been presented all that prevalently to the reader of the financial statement. So nothing's changed from the perspective of what theoretically the city owes from an actuarial perspective. It's just going to be what is going to be reported on that statement and net assets moving forward.
So according to this report, it's $4.7 million now.
Correct.
And you said which in the next year it should move to.
Yeah, if it were required to, and we could have early implemented it, but I don't think any of us wanted to go through that exercise. But that $4.7 million would have been $44.8 million. So that's the magnitude of swing we're talking about.
And what could cause that to happen?
Because it's not, that 4.7 is not an actuarial liability. That's how much you underfunded your actuary's required contribution over the years, let's say over the last 12 years or whatever the period of time since that was GASB, I think 44 and 47, these are 68 and 67, 68 is what we're implementing relative now, so.
One more, Mr. Mayor?
Please, go right ahead.
There was part of the report cited a misfiling in Q4 on a tax return by NPU.
Okay.
And on the bottom of the page, there was a box where the question is asked, did this cause financial statements of the opinion to be materially misstated? And it doesn't say yes or no. Is this misfiling an issue for us to
I'm
be
not
concerned
exactly
about?
sure what you're referring to is. Oh, okay, that's from under federal law. Okay, no, okay, gotcha.
Oh, okay.
Don't.
That is part of, I referred to as the required communications that we're required to provide those charged with governance, the city council in this case. Those are past audit adjustments. So those are not material to the financial statements. They were an error that was encountered, that the audit team discovered or came upon. It actually could have been brought to us by management as well. The thought of management at that point in time was they did not want to adjust the financial statements for the amount that's listed there in that past audit adjustment. We would be therefore required to evaluate as to whether or not passing on that adjustment would cause a material misstatement to the financial statements, which it certainly wouldn't. But again, we're required to communicate that to you, as well as material, if there were material audit adjustments that were determined by the audit team and management agreed to post, so that you on your own as a council, or if there was a finance committee, can evaluate whether or not you feel as though there may be biased or some other attribute embedded within your finance and financial reporting function that you may need to evaluate further.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Number 2, a 2017 year-end summary report from Chairman Michael Menders regarding the Commission for Persons with Disabilities.
A motion to receive.
So moved.
Pro Tem Nash, second, Alderman Stacy Gould. Is there discussion? Yes, Alderman Filbert.
I remember years ago that we used to get something similar to this from all boards and commissions, and I wondered why we don't anymore.
Good point. Perhaps we should.
I think we should.
Thank you for that question and comment. Is there further question? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? Received. Opposed, 6-0.
Number 3, relative to a letter of resignation from Michael Menders from the Commission for Persons with Disabilities.
Motion to receive. Alderwoman Filbert, second. Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Seeing none, let the record please note our sincerest thanks and appreciation for his service on the Commission for Persons with Disabilities. All those in favor? Unanimous. Vote is 6-0.
City Manager's report.
Thank you. This is the City Manager's report for January 2nd, 2018. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone. It's hard to believe we're in 2018. I'm signing things today, and I'm not putting 18 yet, so it'll take a little time. I met with Abby Dolliver and staff regarding Alliance funding for the coming year. The Alliance District program is targeted investment in Connecticut's 33 lowest performing districts. The Connecticut General Statute 10-262U establishes a process for identifying Alliance districts and allocating increased education cost-sharing funding to support these district strategies. This program assists the education experience and outcomes of thousands of underserved students and families throughout the state. My assistant and I met with Jim O'Shea of Achievement Unlimited of Connecticut. Jim will be the facilitator for the special meeting of the council and invited department heads that will be held on January 20th at Foundry 66 in downtown Norwich. Jim has extensive experience facilitating retreats of this nature and has had community planning experience in Norwich. He will work with my assistant to supply a written report for the council regarding the outcome of the meeting. The city's new website has been successfully launched, and press releases were sent to the local media. The focus of the website was redesigned with a focus on mobile users, who now make up approximately 50% of the daily inquiries. It provides the city with a stronger platform to introduce more transactional features in addition to online payments, tax payments. Further enhancements will include online pavilion rental and building permit fees. Press releases were also sent to inform taxpayers that they can pay their tax bills at the local bank, People's Bank, during the month of January. The lines have been longer than normal at the tax office, even with the cold weather. I would like to remind everyone that the city still offers online payments, mail and night drop, in addition to the in-person payments, and I would suggest that people avail themselves if they don't want to wait in line. I think it also was the change in the tax law. People were advance paying earlier than normal. As a little editorial at the end. And that completes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Are there questions of the city manager? I have one. The cold temperatures and such, has there been any contemplation of whether or not an emergency shelter might be needed in our city, particularly with a storm that's pending on Thursday and even colder temperatures coming in behind it?
We have not had a formal discussion. I've had informal discussions with Human Services Department, and we will be considering that again as we go forward this week. Yeah, unfortunately, we're looking at snow, which is normal, but abnormally cold temperatures at least through the weekend, and it's a real health issue.
Only speaking for myself, I would very much like more discussion on that amongst you and your staff. Thank you. Yes, Alderman Gould.
May I ask Chief Scan to come to the podium, please?
I was just looking at the email.
council, Happy New Year. Let's
Happy
hope
New
it's a
Year,
safe
Chief.
one for everyone. In regards to your question, Mayor Nystrom, as we speak, and I did not have a chance to inform the city manager, but the CERT team's been put on alert. We are taking steps tonight to move the shelter mass care trailers to Kelly tomorrow. I'm in discussion with the Red Cross, Sue Boland, with respect to what we're going to be doing if we have major outages. We're having a meeting tomorrow at the EOC with Chris LaRose and Randy Black to set up and warm the EOC, just in case. The message is shelter in place right now. This is simply a winter storm for us. Where it becomes challenging and it challenges the city resources en masse on a global level or with a global nature, then we would certainly open up the EOC as necessary to manage the limited resources we have based on the highest priorities governed by, as dictated by the city manager.
Thank
But
you.
we're moving on it right now.
I'm not surprised at all. Thank you. And I appreciate your comments and Alderwoman Gould asking you to share them with us.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Citizen comment on resolutions is next. I have two brief sign-up lists. Following that, we invite anyone else who'd like to speak to or about a resolution. We simply ask you to identify yourself, your name, and your address at the microphone. Mr. Dale Plummer?
It's getting very cold in here.
Dale Plummer, 25 Broadway, Norwich. I'd like to speak in favor of resolution number 4. I think the advantage to, the ultimate goal of this is to get Reed and Hughes back on the tax rolls, back as a functioning property with people living in it and with, storefront use on the first floor. It has been off the tax roll for decades, actually longer than the city has owned it because it was owned by the hospital and UCFS, prior to the city taking over. Reed and Hughes with the Women's Institute program, will not cost the city at least $597,000 to demolish. That, and possibly much more. And then you have the question of a vacant lot that the city has to maintain. So I think resolution number 4, is very advisable. We have lost 31 buildings in the downtown since 1981, since the Historic and Architectural Survey was done. Many of these could have been rehabilitated using historic tax credits. They could have been on the tax rolls. The vacant lots that have replaced most of these buildings yield little or nothing in taxes, and that is one of our problems. I think putting buildings, as the mayor said in his State of the City address, putting buildings back on the tax rolls is another way of helping solve the city's, fiscal problems. I would applaud the efforts of the city to encourage downtown development. I think these could be augmented in an important way by the use of historic tax credits. The federal historic tax credits, which we were afraid were going to be lost under the new tax plan, have been saved. They are still available, a 20% investment tax credit for certified historic rehabilitation. So that should be a major factor, and the city should be doing whatever it can to encourage the use of those tax credits. And I think that's why the Women's Institute plan is also important, because it would utilize tax credits and other means, but the more examples we can have here of successful tax credits, the more we can encourage developers to use them, the more benefit to our downtown. The advantage of them is it brings in outside investment, brings in dollars that otherwise would not come into the city. Those are federal and state tax credits, so they don't affect city taxes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Nina Barkley.
Nina Barkley, 3 Lathrop Lane, Norwich. I am just here to speak on behalf of Resolution 4. I can remember the change in downtown with the restoration of the Warrigan and how many people speak to me about it as a positive step for Norwich. I'm looking forward to continuing to see things like the Foundry 66 and the things that Mayor Nystrom talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Massey, please.
Susan Massey, 1 Sachem Terrace. Dan Topalis, who runs the Warrigan Gallery, the gallery at the Warrigan Hotel, asked me to put his name, or to speak his name so he goes on record as being in favor of supporting resolution number 4. As am I. Besides being a member of the Norwich Heritage Trust, I am on the board of the Norwich Arts Center. So I have an interest, a special interest in things being developed downtown. So I think it would be a very wise move for the city to invest in itself, and I hope you will make that decision tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the council on resolutions? Please.
William Allen, 25 Broadway, Norwich, Connecticut. I'm speaking in favor of resolution number 4. I think it would be a investment in the city. It is very disheartening to hear of destruction of 31 separate buildings and 30 years of decay or stagnation. I have to say the previous administration tried to reverse 50 years of the same thing over and over again, and I think Norwich, in some cases, has 30 years of doing the exact same thing. Destruction is permanent, and its sister, death, is also permanent, but investment is at least a positive step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, please.
Good evening and Happy New Year. Sheila Hayes, 382 Laurel Hill Avenue. Again, I am not speaking for or against resolution number 4, but I come before you to ask the questions that I asked probably the 1st of December. 60-day extension. If I remember back in December when they asked for the 30-day extension, the question is what is the plan that the City Council will plan on having should this end of 60 days, now that we've extinguished the 30 days, if you grant the 60 days extension, what will be the plan once that 60 days is finished? Have you had any conversation with the state concerning the building itself? If I remember back in December, the city manager had not spoken to SHPO. Should there be a period in time where this doesn't work out? And I'm not advocating that it won't work out. It's just that what is the game plan? Who's talking to who? What has been brought forth to make us engage in another 60-day extension? Is 60 days enough? Do we know the direction we're going to go? And I say this because as we're talking about a major storm coming through, as you're talking about the winter, this city in the past has been more inclined to pay out on lawsuits than to work with someone to ensure that a building is in good condition or safe condition. So knowing that we're going to enter into a major storm and a difficult winter right now, what is the plan? What's the city plan on this? Not just what the extension, giving somebody an extension, what are we going to do? What are we going to face as a city? Those are the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to us on the citizen comment? Anyone else like to join us and speak to us under citizen comment? Last call, citizen comment, still open. Seeing no one else, we thank you for your comments and sharing your ideas. Citizen comment is closed.
New business number 1, relative to holding the St. Patrick's Day Parade on Sunday, March 4th, 2018.
Entertain a motion to bring this before us. President Pro Tem Nass, and second, Alderman DeLucia. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Oh, excuse me, there's a blank space
I'm sorry.
in second paragraph, held in March since, I think we went through this last year, too. There should be, I believe, a year in there.
It's in paragraph 3.
Or is it just,
There is a reference to the year in paragraph 3, March 4th, 2018,
right,
at the end.
but it says,
This
so
was
organized
since.
have been held annually in March since semicolon,
Yep.
and, so maybe it's just my interpretation of the grammar.
Legalese.
I need just, have been held annually in March, and since to be deleted.
Oh. His recommendation is to remove the word since.
That works for me.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to amend it.
Motion to amend.
Second.
Representative Nass, second. Alderman Gould. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
On the amendment.
On the amendment? On the resolution as amended, is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Motion is 6-0.
Number 2, relative to a reappointment of a regular member to the Norwich Baseball Stadium Authority.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Gould. She beat you, Bill. Is there a second? Alderman DeLucia. Is there discussion? Seeing no discussion for the benefit of the public, the person being reappointed is Thomas Cummings. All those in favor? Unanimous. Vote 6-0. 3, please.
Relative to authorizing the 347 Central Avenue Committee of Sale to assist City Manager John Salamone to issue an RFP for property located at 347 Central Avenue.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Gould, is there a second? Alderman DeLucia, is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Vote is 6-0.
4, relative to authorizing City Manager John Salamone to issue a 60-day extension commencing January 3rd, 2018 for financing and funding obligations to the Women's Institute.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Philbrick, second. Alderwoman Gould, is there discussion? Alderman.
To some of the comments that we heard during public forum, I would say that the idea of extending this 60 more days is to provide the Women's Center with part of what they asked for at the last meeting, which was more time to try to secure funding and loans that would better suit their cause and their purpose. And I can say, not to speak on behalf of the entire council, but as a council, we agreed that this project deserves every opportunity to do that. And that I felt that this was the best way to provide the support that we believe is appropriate at this time. As far as a long-term plan, I think that this is a project that we are going to watch evolve, and as it evolves, we will act accordingly. But we cannot predict what's going to happen in the next 30 days, in the next 60 days. So the best thing that we can do in the best interest of the city and the project is to afford them more time. And that is the purpose of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there further discussion? Alderwoman Gould.
I too are going to agree with the sentiments of Alderman DeLucia that we very much would like to see this project go forward. But I'm hoping that at the 50-day mark or somewhere in there, we'll have an update from the Women's Institute as to where they are with their financing. And depending on their answer, whether they're really close or they've made no headway, at that time I hope that the city manager will have a discussion, or his designee have a discussion with the folks in Hartford to talk about the fact that this plan may not be able to move forward. The Board of Directors has already spoken with Ms. Crum and voiced their hesitation in moving forward with this project. They are the only viable development group that we have at this time. I don't see us going out for another RFP. So I hope at some point in time we're going to have to speak to the folks if the Women's Institute cannot come up with all of the funding with the Historic Preservation Society and say, listen, we've done everything that we can do, and now the City Council must make a decision once this extension expires.
Ms. Alderman Nash.
I would just like to apologize. It was pointed out to me at the last time I spoke on this, I was a little harsh with the individuals from the Women's Institute. As the representative of veterans for the city of Norwich, I do realize there's a growing population of women veterans that are homeless, and this is an organization that could help alleviate some of that, especially in the Norwich and London County areas. I do want to see the project go forward. I just want to make sure everyone understands that there's more than just that building to worry about. There's 2 adjacent buildings. There's a public sidewalk. Yes, the buildings, I was unaware 30-some buildings were tore down, but I don't think anyone who sat on this council or previous councils wanted to see history being torn away or bulldozed over. I don't think that's the plan. There is nobody anywhere that can claim that they enjoy history any more than I do. Trust me, if you know me, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I want to protect our historical value of Norwich. I think it's one of our greatest assets. But we also have to protect our citizens and the other business owners and property owners that are adjacent that building. If we can't move forward with the Women's Institute, then the building needs to be removed to protect other city assets. It's only fair to them. I will support this because I do pray and hope, and I know that a lot of times hoping for stuff is not the best thing to do, but I do hope that the city, that the Women's Institute can come up with the funding to save the building. But I just want everyone out there that thinks let's just tear it down. That's never been the sentiment. The sentiment has been to save it if we could. And I think this council and previous council that I've sat on has done its due diligence to protect and save this building. We may not have kept it, which I can't explain that, but all I can say is that no one up here wants to tear down part of our history. Nobody wants to see that happen, but we do have to protect. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further comment? All those in favor? Resolution as it is. It's unanimous. Vote is 6-0.
Number 5, relative to appointing a Norwich ratepayer representative to CMEEC.
Motion to bring it forward, please. Alderwoman Stacey Gould, second, President Pro Tem Nash. Is there discussion? Alderman DeLucia.
I would just like to thank everyone who applied to be this representative on our behalf. The interviews were interesting and very informative. It was not an easy decision to pick one person, but I do believe that in spite of the qualifications of all the candidates, we picked the best person for this position. And I thank Alderman Gould and Alderman Philbrick for bringing me up to speed very quickly so that I could participate in this. And I strongly support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there further discussion? For the members of the public, the person to recommend to be appointed is Mr. Rashid Haynes. If you do not know him, he recently did complete partial term of office on our Board of Education, where I think he demonstrated a wonderful gift of bringing people together and finding solutions. And I know that we look for him to do the same here. All those in favor of the resolution? It's unanimous, 6-0.
Number 6, relative to an appointment to the Building Code Board of Appeals.
Motion, bring it forward, please. Alderman Stacey Gould, is there a second? Alderman DeLucia, is there comment? Alderman DeLucia.
Again, I was brought up to speed very quickly by my fellow committee members, and I do appreciate that. I know this individual quite well, and I believe he brings the expertise and the experience that the committee was looking for and that the city will benefit from greatly. So I support this resolution wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Yes, Alderman Browning?
Mr. Phoenix was formerly a building and zoning official for several municipalities down in Florida. He's eminently qualified for this position, and I support this resolution.
Thank you, sir. Is there further comment? All those in favor? Unanimous. Vote is 6-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? President Pro Tem Nash. All those in favor?
Thank you and Happy New Year.
Unanimous.